Hey now, today we're going to take a look at the Battle at Kemble's Cascade from Z-Man Games. Now this is a loving homage to the shoot-em-ups or shmups of olden days, where video games, especially arcade games, where you take control of a lone alien fighter or Earth fighter or whatever it is, spaceship, going through space trying to shoot asteroids, shoot enemies, and you're on a scrolling screen that continues to just keep going forward, either side-scrolling or vertical scrolling, where the enemies keep coming and obstacles keep coming. And to be clear, there still are shoot 'em ups being made today, but this is based more off of the older ones. Like the art is more pixelated like that. It's not like the ones that they call bullet hell games, especially coming out of Japan, which are just like insane and usually have like mecha and anime cutscenes, stuff like that. This is based off more games like, I guess, Space Invaders to a degree, although past that, more like Gradius and R-Type and games like that. And you take control of one of these spaceships, and you're doing all the same things you would do in a shoot 'em up, except that you can shoot the other people as well, the other players in the game, which is different from old shoot 'em ups where you had to team up with the other players and try to get through the alien swarm. And you might be asking yourself, how on earth could they actually implement this idea of a scrolling shoot 'em up game with a board game? Well, they pulled it off pretty well and in a pretty innovative way. So let's go ahead and take a look at how the game is played. Then we're going to come back. I'll let you know what I think. Okay, I'm going to give you a very brief overview of Battle at Kemble's Cascade. This is a competitive game for 2 to 5 players that is an homage, a loving homage, to space shoot-em-ups or shmups from yesteryear and even today. So this is a typical setup, which, as you can tell, is a lot of different stuff. If you remember old shoot-em-ups, the whole thing was that the screen scrolled, either vertically or horizontally. In this case, it's vertically. And how you represent that are these plastic trays that you slide these space cards into. You actually, I don't really want to take them apart right now, but you assemble each of the trays from 2 different trays that slide together, and therefore you can modify how many of these space cards can go out into these trays. Because if you were only playing with 2 or 3 players, you would only have, I believe, 3 spots. This is for a 4 or 5 player setup, 4 players in particular, and therefore we need 4 space cards for every one of the rows, and there are 5 rows up here. Now, the rest of the stuff that's involved in the setup, each have your own player board, which all the player boards are the same. You all start with the same stuff. You have tracks representing threat and energy, and you'll put a cube on 5 for energy. And energy is really your life points in the game. If you ever get down to 0 energy, which is the skull and crossbones here, you explode. But you can also use energy to give yourself extra actions, and so therefore it's an expendable resource, but one that could lead to you being destroyed if you're not too careful. You each start off with a ship, which will be off the board at the beginning of the game. When you start the game, you'll start going onto the board. You have all these little player tokens, which will be used to keep track of different stats on some of the gear and equipment that you have, different things that show up on the board like alien artifacts. But also, if you attack another player, they'll have to take one of your player tokens as a PvP threat, which means that if they die, you get extra points. I know this is all a lot to take in, but I'll go through some of the different details. You start off with 1 upgrade card. That card is the roll cage, or the rotary cage, excuse me. That's because when you're moving your ship out on the board and trying to fire at enemies, you are limited to whatever direction orthogonally your rotary cage happens to be facing. At the beginning of the game or whenever you die, you can set that for free. But during the course of the game, as you're going through the galaxy shooting at things, you have to spend an energy, that's another thing you can spend your energy on, just to readjust your rotary cage and aim in a different direction. And the thing is, where your rotary cage is facing is actually dependent on where you're sitting at the table as well. So if I wanted it to face forward and I was the blue player, I would actually have to set it like this because I'm in this direction. If I was the red player, I'd actually have to set my rotary cage like that, if you could tell, because that's the direction that I'm facing. So it's a little confusing, but it's just meant to keep things pretty streamlined. And then you have all this other stuff out here that is for the setup. You have the scoreboard, which has more of the big cubes for each of the players. The game is played until the last scroll bar comes down, and once you cannot replace another scroll bar out there with more space cards, the game is going to end. Whoever has the most glory, which are the victory points, is the winner. You have achievements, which are things you can go for during the game. For instance, you have, let's see, the Ram card, which says get scroll pushed into another player. If you do that, this symbol, this green symbol here, is glory, so you immediately gain a glory point and a new achievement will come out. Explorer, receive glory from an alien structure. Death Wish, get destroyed, intentionally or not. That's a pretty easy one. Or do 4 moves in 1 turn, which is actually pretty difficult because you only have 1 free move per turn, and you have to spend energy to get extra moves. Alright, so that's the general stuff. Then you have mission cards. Each player is going to start with a mission card in play. You only get 1 per game. And this is something you can work towards that will also get you glory. So for instance, the blue player here has Energizer. End your turn with 5 energy or more 4 times, which can be very difficult because remember, you may be taking hits which reduce your energy or spending your energy for other actions. You have power-up cards. You'll each start with 1 of these. These are like one-shot use cards, or cards that you'll hold on to for the end of the game. For instance, here the mini bar says you hold on to it till the end of the game and you gain 1 glory. That one's very simple. You have quantum sensors. You play immediately when drawn to gain 1 more sensor card for the rest of the game, and so on. Lots of different special effects that could happen from the power card deck, and you'll have to go to certain spots on the board in order to get more of them. Now, the sensor cards, which were just mentioned, you'll start off with a couple of these, and every time that you only have 1 in hand, you'll draw an extra one. These are they're used for 2 different purposes. One is to determine turn order, so everyone will have 2 cards in hand, and at the start of each round, you're each going to play 1 card face down secretly, and they all have a different number on them. Once everyone's flipped over, you'll go in order from highest to lowest of who played the highest card. Now, some of the cards, very rare ones, let me see if I can find one, actually give you a bonus if you play them for your sensor card for the round. Here we go. Your first overcharge is free. There's also ones that give you, which is giving yourself extra actions by spending energy. You also get things like extra movement, stuff like that. Now, the other use for sensor cards is that, you know, obviously you have these space cards out here and they're populated by enemies and wormholes and asteroids, and you might be wondering, well, what happens if you destroy those things? You mean that they don't go away right away until you scroll down and off the board, so how is that going to work? Well, that's what you use the sensor cards for. You actually cover up the things that you destroy or manipulate or take. So if I destroyed that enemy, I would cover it up with a sensor card. If I took this power-up card, I would cover that up with a sensor card. Therefore, you're actually clearing out the areas of space. And as I said before, just to make it clear, when at the end of a round, you're actually physically going to remove the 5th row, which is the bottom row, take all the cards off it, push everyone that happens to be there up 1, then move down the rows, put new space cards on the top of that, and then move the row up here. Put in new space cards, move the top row up. So you're constantly going to be scrolling. And you might get scrolled into objects that are going to damage you, but them's the breaks. You have to kind of plan that out ahead of time. Let's see, other things I want to mention right now. You have upgrade cards. You can only use upgrade cards if you choose to power down for your turn. Power down is what you do instead of taking your normal actions in order to regain some energy and resolve your threat, and which I'll get to in a minute. Return player versus player markers of people who have shot you before, and you can shop. What you use to shop are these little crystals called bolonium. And the reason why I have 3 crystals on everyone's board right at this moment are because out here on the board there are some crystal icons, some large crystal icons with little glowing aura around them. Whenever those space cards come out into the scroll bars, everyone immediately gains a crystal or bolonium. So that's a good way to, even without shooting anything else, to get more bolonium. You can also get some for destroying some ships. Most enemy ships will get you bolonium just for destroying them, and some of the more powerful ones will also get you glory as well. So whenever you have this chance to shop, which is either when you power down or when you die, it's as simple as spending the crystals that you have to buy some of these upgrade cards. You have generator, shield, engine, laser, missile, flamethrower, and gamma. So things like the top row of cards, or the first 3 cards, generator, shield, and engine, are all about helping you out, giving you more energy, more shield. So this one says when resolving threat, you reduce your threat by 1. Now threat is what happens when your ships are too close to enemy ships or when other players shoot you. They all have this little star burst symbol here, which represents threat, and it's the same symbol that's on your player board as well. And whenever you end your turn next to enemies that are dealing threat to you, either orthogonally and diagonally or from a distance, depending on what the symbol is on their card. For instance, this one here means that it would actually deal threat to you as long as it's visible to you in a straight line. Whenever you have to take that threat, you'll move your little threat marker up. Now, when you get to now this happens, adding new threat happens at the end of your turn, but the step 2 of your turn, so on your next turn, is to resolve that threat, which means you have to lower your energy for every threat that you still had on your board. Now you can remove threat by just moving. Every space that you moves your threat down 1 because you're moving away from the hail of bullets that are coming at you. And you can also do that by when you power down for the turn, you have to resolve your threat. So you want to make sure that you don't power down until you've taken care of your threat sufficiently enough. But items like the shield will help you reduce the threat even more. You have the generator, which gives you more energy when you recharge, because normally you only recharge during a power down 2 energy. That one lets you get an extra one. The different weapons here, like the missiles, lets you deal 2 damage for every shot instead of 1. And also it gives you like a spray damage for having a shot a missile, which explodes. You have the laser, which very simply will do 2 damage instead of 1. Then you have the, let's see, what's another good example? The gamma ray, which will actually go right through other enemies and damage an entire row or column, depending on which way you're facing. So that can be a really cool way to deal damage. And remember that some enemies have more than 1 hit point. Or some enemies and obstacles. So for instance, you have this thing here, which I believe is like a quasar or a nebula. Oh, an alien structure or singularity. So this one will get you a glory, but it takes 2 energy to kill it, which means you're going to have to fire twice. Since you only get 1 free shot per round, you're going to have to either spend an energy or have a weapon that deals 2 energy, because enemy damage does not linger. They basically heal up at the end of your turn. So you have to start all over, or another player has to start all over once it gets back to their turn. So the course of the game, and when it's your turn, and remember you determine that via the sensor cards, you move once and fire. Moving is, in the beginning of the game, you start off the board. When you start the game, you go wherever you want at the beginning. But obviously, if you move into an object like an enemy ship, you're going to take damage and be pushed away. Now, movement is in all 8 directions, so you can go orthogonally or diagonally, even though firing is only orthogonally based on where your rotary cage is. So you can move once and fire once, then decide whether you're going to overcharge, which is spend 1 energy to take 1 extra action, and 2 energy to take a second action. But remember, you're spending essentially your life points in order to do that. Then you resolve the threat that you had from the previous turn. Then you add new threat based on your position on the board. So if I was right here, I wasn't able to defeat these guys for whatever reason, I would take a total of 3 threat and I'd move up my marker. When other players want to shoot me, well, it's just as simple as being within range, having a clear shot at me. So this guy would have to be destroyed in this case, and I'd probably want to go here and take this power-up card. Having a clear shot, having my rotary cage facing the right direction, and having an action with which to fire, it moves up my threat, and I have to take 1 of their PvP markers. Whenever someone dies and explodes, everyone else that's still on the board gains 2 victory points, 2 glory, but anyone who also had a player versus player marker on you gains an additional victory point. So it does behoove you to shoot people sometimes if you have the action to spend. Now, there's lots of other interesting stuff I can go over as far as the different cards that come out. There's different obstacles and things like that. But a couple of the more interesting ones are the mid-bosses and the final boss. So hidden somewhere in the deck, you have the way that you build the space deck is from multiple different decks of your choice and how many cards that you use. So like, for instance, one of the mini decks that you build out of is mostly asteroids. The first one that we used here is mostly like the drone ships. But they get more complicated. You have more crazier stuff like you have wormholes, and here's an example of one of the drones that has 2 energy instead, so it's much harder to deal with. Wormholes can connect to each other. You can freely move between them if there's at least 2 out on the board. You have black holes, which are much worse because those will immediately destroy you. I have these out here on the board too, but here's an example of a space where you just go onto and you immediately gain an energy, which you might want to do just to screw over the other players. Here's one of the alien artifacts. On this one, you have to actually spend 2 movement when you're on it in order to gain 3 glory. And any number of players can do this, but you can only do it once. You just put one of your player versus PvP or player markers on it to indicate that you've done it, and you immediately gain 3 glory. Let's see, other examples. It's a good one. Here's one of the mini bosses, and he is a nasty one. So he actually has 2 segments. And anytime that he'll be out here on the board, anytime that someone blows up one of the segments, you'll cover it up with the sensor card, but his other half will still be there. And also he gives a crystal to everyone when he shows up, but each segment gives 1 threat plus another distant threat, and each segment has 3 energy, but you get 1 glory for killing one of the segments. But at the bottom of every stack of the space deck is a boss card. There are, I believe, 4 or 5 different bosses in the game. You'll randomly put one of their boss cards on the bottom of the deck. When you're ready to put out a new, when this is the final space card and you have to put out a new row, you'll flip it over, see what your boss is. In this case, it is Tundrageist. And then, let's just very hastily and messily clean this off. Then you're going to grab that boss's stack of boss cards and put them out. Depending on the number of players, you may not use all of their boss cards out onto the board. And you see that they're in different segments that all fit together, and they're numbered for ease. So here we go. I guess he takes up 2 rows. I did not actually use this boss before. All right. Yeah, so here is the very nasty Tundrageist. So there's a lot of stuff going on here. The thing about bosses are that a lot of times they'll have special abilities that the normal enemies just don't have. Like, for instance, this segment here, this one's very simple. If you blow up this part of him, he just has 3 energy and you get 2 glory. But this part, same thing, but you cannot use missiles on this part of his body. One of these parts gives distant threat and is immune to the laser upgrade card, which means lasers will not work on him. Also, you have these little special effect cards, which means that you'll have to refer to the boss card to see what that special effect's going to be, this little exclamation mark. In this case, it's his whirlwind ability. So whenever a boss part with the exclamation symbol is destroyed, all players gain a threat. So bosses are really tough, but again, this is going to trigger the end of the game. When that comes out, no more space cards are going to come out. And at the end of every round, you're simply removing, well, you wouldn't remove it like that, but you'll simply remove rows and keep scrolling down until eventually all that's left is the boss. And then when you get to the last segment of the boss, that signals the end of the game. So this is a good chance for you to get some last-minute glory, assuming you've been upgrading your ship enough to sufficiently take care of him. And that's really the game. I mean, you're going to go through, you're going to take your actions, decide if you want to overcharge or not, trying to get as much glory as possible, potentially attacking the other players, worrying about the mission, which can get you extra glory, or just trying to generally take out as many enemies as possible to get glory that way. There's a lot of different ways to victory, but it all boils down to traditional side-scrolling or vertical scrolling shoot-'em-ups. Now, let's get to my final thoughts. Well, first off, I mean, you have to talk about the theme of Kemble's Cascade, and it is awesome. I mean, could you have ever imagined that someone would have done this? I mean, I guess so, but it would have been pretty far down the list of themes people would dig up and actually manage to make a board game out of. And it's so cool that they did. I love it. When I first heard about it, I'm like, what? That's amazing. So, and I think it comes out pretty well from the game. I mean, obviously, it's not like a very story-driven game, just like the original games that this was based off of are not very story-driven. It's not really about that. It's about the feel of having to shoot 'em up, of constantly pushing forward and, being at death's door. I said this isn't really like a bullet hell type game, like those types of side-scrollers, but it's still tough. There's still aliens coming at you and aliens constantly shooting you via the threat markers and, asteroids above you, and you're constantly moving forward, which means you might get pushed into something or somebody, and it's just like constant threat. So that feeling comes through pretty well as far as I'm concerned. Component-wise, I like the artwork and I like the little ships and things like that. But I was not really happy with the whole tray system. Now, that's the whole crux of the game, and I think that what it does works pretty well. This is the best way I can think of, and I wouldn't have thought of it originally, to simulate the scrolling game. But it's the trays are really cheap plastic. I mean, I guess they kind of had to do it. Otherwise, this game, if they used like wood or really good durable plastic, this game would have been like twice the cost. So it's hard to fault them for that, but this is one of those games. There's a lot of games I have in my collection where I never really think about pimping them out because they're pretty fine as they are, even if the components aren't amazing. This is one of those games where I'm like, if I'm keeping this, I'm going to want to pimp it out at some point because it really needs a better way to get those trays moving and they don't stack, because you have to combine 2 of them and spread them out. They don't stack very well. So that's a quibble about the components, but I like the artwork and the presentation of everything else. It works well with like the pixel arcade style art. I like that. As far as the gameplay, like I said, super. I mean, the theme comes through very well with the mechanics, which are very, very innovative. I like that this game is not. I think based on the premise and based off of what people were probably expecting, including myself, they could have made this more of an Ameritrash game, in that there's like tons of dice rolling and just like, yeah, shoot everything and blow everything up. The game has a lot of strategy involved. You have a lot of choices, especially when you add in the upgrade cards, which I mean, you'll have them from the beginning, but once you start realizing, okay, how I need to plan this out, like which route am I going to go? Tons and tons of weapons, just shoot everything in front of me. Am I going to play it safe? Get some shields. Get focus on upgrading my generator. Do I take the generator at all? You know, things like this. How about the roll cage? I'll upgrade my roll cage so that because knowing that I'm going to have to be moving around, aiming a lot. There's all these different things you have to worry about and decide which path you're going to go down. And at the end of a game, everyone's going to have different tech and is doing different things, which feels cool. So you all start off the same, which was a complaint I had at the beginning, like, oh man, I wish we had like special powers and stuff, but that's coming out through the different upgrades, which is super cool, and so I like that a lot. And you need those because the game has a lot of pressure, and it's do you move forward, rushing to grab something, rushing to grab a power-up card or space, or rushing to grab more energy because just to keep other people from getting it. You know, even if you have to spend one of your extra spend energy to take one of your extra actions. I've done that. It's worth it to take another energy, even if you have to spend one to do it, just to keep someone else from getting it. So meaning things like that. But by running up and doing that, or rushing to get one of the alien artifact spaces and manipulate that, you might be surrounding yourself with 4 or 5 enemies, and or it wouldn't be that many, but enough enemies to really make you worry and to put you in maybe in the range of the mid boss or the big boss at the end. How much threat are you willing to take to move yourself forward? And there's something to be said in this game, however, for being very aggressive in that way and just letting yourself die a few times, because dying, you're giving the other players points, but they're going to die too. And it's one of those risk mitigation factors, like, okay, I'm going to push my luck here and die and hope that it doesn't push my opponents too far ahead, and hope that the amount of points I can get for pushing myself to the limit is going to outweigh that, because it's a timed game. Though that big boss is going to show up, and then you've only got a certain amount of time before the game ends, and you need to make sure that you're in a position to win by that point. Whether you've already upgraded yourself, gotten the cool, gotten enough power-up cards to make a difference. The power-up cards add a random element to the game that I think that some people will have an issue with, and certainly I played with people that were like boom, throw it on a card, and you're like, ah, come on. You know, it is a take that kind of mechanic, but it's not too overwhelming. Some of them are pretty amusing, like the self-destruct button, and it's dumb and it's very simple, but the mini bar is very funny when it's like, I've got a mini bar. So, but I like that they're in there. It's just another added layer to the game. It's also more fiddliness. There's more cards to worry about, but okay. I like the pushing up, and I mean, you can let yourself get pushed up, but you might get pushed into something if you're not in the right spot, and if you don't get out of there quick enough, like, oh, you see this, like, a row of asteroids coming down, maybe I should work on getting away from that. Is it worth getting this power up knowing I might get pushed into them if I can't get out? Things like that. Staying away from your opponents because they can shoot you. Like I said, that's a significant difference from original shoot 'em ups. And it's a little wonky how that works. You shoot someone and you increase their threat, and then they take one of your little markers and they'll get extra points. But it works out pretty well. It's another part of the strategy. You can go through the whole game without really shooting anyone if you think that you can get more points by taking out by manipulating the artifacts if they come out, or by taking out pieces of the boss and the mid-boss. But at some point, you can't just sit around and wait for other people to blow up and hope that the points that they give you just for that, the base amount of points, is going to be enough. You're going to need to shoot people at some point, I've found. The game does reward aggression, and that's where the huge part of it that is Ameritrash comes through. But there is resource management here. There's knowing when to power down. There's a lot of interesting decisions here that I wasn't really expecting when I first started playing the game. So I like it. I like it a lot. I love the theme. I think it comes through pretty well. I think it's kind of fiddly, and it's too long for what it is. I mean, the box, I think it says 90 to 120 minutes, 75 to 90 minutes. No, I would actually go with 90 to 120, especially for your first game. It's going to take a couple hours getting used to how everything works and how the scroll works and all of that. But I think it'll get quicker after that. It did for us. But I like it. If you can deal with that, if you like the theme, especially if you like the theme, definitely give it a shot because we had some fun with it. It rewards aggression. So if you're not into heavy combat games, you might want to try it first. But other than that, solid game, and I do recommend it. My name is Nick. This has been Board Game Brawl, and I'm reminding you to get out there and game every day in every way. Take care.